Have you ever looked at your partner, wanted to feel that same spark you used to, and wondered where it went? Or maybe you've quietly asked yourself, is something wrong with me? Here's what may surprise you. Most people blame aging, low testosterone, or stress. But what if none of those are actually the biggest reason? What if your body has been trying to tell you something for months, maybe even years, and the signs have been there all along? Today, I'm going to reveal the 10 real reasons your libido may be disappearing. And I promise you, reason number 1 is the one almost nobody expects. Yet it's the one that changes everything. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand what your body has been trying to tell you. And more importantly, what you can do to start getting your desire back naturally. I'm Dr. Ava, a urologist, and every week I meet people who quietly carry this concern for months, sometimes even years, before they finally build up the courage to ask about it. Many of them tell me exactly the same thing. I thought I was just getting older. I figured this was normal. I thought I was the only one. And almost every single time, I tell them something they weren't expecting to hear. You're not alone. And more importantly, you're probably not out of options. Low libido is one of the most common concerns I see in my practice, yet it's still one of the least talked about. People feel embarrassed. They blame themselves. Some even convince themselves that something must be wrong with their relationship, or that this is simply what happens as you get older. But that's often far from the truth. Before we begin the countdown, there's one thing I want every person watching to remember. Your libido is not a measure of your worth. It doesn't determine how attractive you are. It doesn't determine how much you love your partner. It doesn't define your masculinity, your femininity, or your value as a person. It's simply one of the many ways your body communicates with you. And just like high blood pressure, chronic fatigue, or persistent pain, it's a signal that's worth paying attention to. Because your body rarely does anything without a reason. Sometimes that reason is hormonal, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's neurological, sometimes it's something as simple as chronic sleep deprivation. And sometimes it's several small things happening at the same time. That's why this conversation matters. Because when you understand the reason, you stop blaming yourself. And when you stop blaming yourself, you can finally start fixing the real problem. So let's begin. Number 10, your brain controls your libido more than your body. This surprises almost everyone. Ask someone what controls sexual desire, and most people immediately answer hormones or testosterone. Hormones absolutely matter. Testosterone matters, estrogen matters. But neither of them is where desire actually begins. Desire begins inside your brain. Think about it for a moment. Before your body responds, before your heart beats faster, before blood flow changes, before hormones even begin influencing your behavior, your brain has already made thousands of calculations. It processes what you see, what you hear, how safe you feel, your emotional connection, your stress level, your memories, even your mood. All of those signals are analyzed within fractions of a second. That's because your brain is the command center for every sexual response your body experiences. One of the most important chemicals involved is dopamine. You've probably heard dopamine described as the feel-good chemical. That's only part of the story. Dopamine is actually the chemical of motivation, anticipation, curiosity, and reward. It's what makes you want something. When dopamine pathways are functioning well, desire feels effortless. You don't force yourself to be interested. Your brain naturally becomes curious, excited, and engaged. But here's something many people never hear about. Your brain also has a braking system. Just as your car needs both an accelerator and brakes, your brain does too. Certain chemicals, particularly serotonin and naturally occurring opioid receptors, help slow sexual desire when your body needs to focus elsewhere. Think about what happens after you've eaten a large meal. Your appetite naturally decreases. The same thing happens with sexual desire. After intimacy, those braking systems help your body return to balance. They're completely normal. The problem begins when those brakes stay engaged all the time. Stress, poor sleep, certain medications, depression, chronic illness, relationship conflict, persistent anxiety. All of these can strengthen those inhibitory pathways. Meanwhile, dopamine activity quietly decreases. The result? You stop feeling interested. Not because you've suddenly become a different person, not because you've fallen out of love, but because your brain is prioritizing survival over pleasure. And here's where the science becomes incredibly interesting. Researchers have actually used advanced brain imaging to study people experiencing persistent low libido. What they found was remarkable. The regions responsible for sexual excitement often showed significantly less activity than they did in people with healthy sexual desire. Think about that. This isn't simply in your imagination. There are measurable biological changes happening inside the brain. For many of my patients, hearing that is incredibly reassuring because they've spent months blaming themselves, wondering if they're lazy, wondering if something is emotionally wrong with them, wondering whether they're somehow failing their partner. The truth is, your brain may simply be responding to everything else your body has been carrying. And here's another fascinating fact. Your brain cannot fully focus on pleasure while simultaneously preparing for danger. It's one or the other. If your brain believes you're overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, constantly worried, or mentally distracted, it naturally shifts resources away from intimacy. That's not failure, that's biology. But here's what surprises people even more. Your brain's desire center can be switched off by something millions of people experience every single day, often without realizing it. And that brings us to number 9, chronic stress keeps your body in survival mode. If I had to choose one reason that's become dramatically more common over the last 20 years, it would be this one. Most people think stress is just a feeling. A busy week, a difficult boss, financial pressure, family responsibilities, a packed calendar. But inside your body, stress is much more than an emotion. It's chemistry. Your brain can't always tell the difference between running from danger and constantly worrying about your mortgage. It doesn't know the difference between escaping a wild animal and answering emails late into the night. To your brain, stress is stress. And every time your brain senses that stress, it activates one of the most powerful survival systems in your body. It releases cortisol. Now, cortisol often gets a bad reputation, but the truth is, cortisol is essential. Without it, you couldn't survive. It helps regulate your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your immune response, your energy. It prepares your body to handle emergencies. The problem isn't cortisol itself. The problem is when your body never gets a chance to turn it off. Think about that for a moment. Years ago, stress usually came in short bursts. You escaped danger, your body recovered, life returned to normal. Today, many people wake up stressed, drive to work stressed, work under pressure all day, come home exhausted, scroll through stressful news before bed, then lie awake thinking about tomorrow. Their nervous system never truly rests. Eventually, your body begins making sacrifices. Because from your brain's perspective, if you're fighting for survival every day, reproduction isn't the priority. Connection isn't the priority. Pleasure isn't the priority. Staying alive is. That's why chronic stress quietly begins shutting down systems that aren't immediately necessary. One of those systems is your libido. For men, elevated cortisol can interfere with healthy testosterone production. Over time, that may contribute to lower energy, reduced motivation, difficulty building muscle, and declining sexual desire. For women, chronic stress disrupts communication between the brain and the reproductive hormones that regulate desire throughout the menstrual cycle. Hormonal rhythms become less predictable, energy drops, mood changes, and libido often follows. But hormones aren't the whole story. Stress also changes the way your brain thinks. Have you ever climbed into bed completely exhausted, only to discover your brain suddenly decided it was the perfect time to replay every problem in your life? You start thinking about tomorrow's meeting, the bills, the children, the groceries, the unfinished projects, the phone call you forgot to make. Your body is lying still, but your mind is running a marathon. Now imagine trying to feel romantic in that moment. It's incredibly difficult. Not because you don't love your partner, but because your brain is still trying to solve problems. That's why I often tell my patients something they never forget. The most important sexual organ in your body isn't your pelvis. It isn't your hormones. It isn't any reproductive organ. It's your brain. Because if your brain never feels safe, the rest of your body struggles to follow. Here's something fascinating. Your nervous system has 2 major operating modes. One is called the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight response. The other is the parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and recover mode. Healthy intimacy depends heavily on the parasympathetic system. It's difficult for your body to relax into intimacy while simultaneously preparing for danger. It's like trying to press the accelerator and the brake at the same time. Your body simply doesn't function well that way. This is why reducing stress isn't just about improving your mood. It's about creating the biological conditions that allow desire to return. Now, I know what some people are thinking. So, should I just eliminate stress? If only life were that simple. Stress will always exist. The goal isn't eliminating it. The goal is helping your body recover from it. Sometimes that's through exercise. Sometimes it's better sleep. Sometimes it's prayer or meditation. Sometimes it's therapy. Sometimes it's spending time in nature. Sometimes it's simply learning to say no. Every healthy recovery habit tells your nervous system the danger has passed. And that's exactly the message your brain needs to hear. Now, here's another mistake many people make. They assume that because they've been stressed for years, there's nothing they can do. That's simply not true. One of the most encouraging things about the human body is how adaptable it is. I've seen patients who spent years feeling disconnected from themselves, only to notice meaningful improvements after making several consistent lifestyle changes. Not overnight, but gradually, because healing usually happens gradually. And that brings us to another hidden reason your libido may be disappearing. In fact, this next reason affects millions of people every single night, often without them realizing it. They think they're sleeping enough, but their body tells a completely different story. And once you understand how deeply sleep influences your hormones, your brain, and your sexual health, you'll never look at bedtime the same way again. Which brings us to number 8, poor sleep. Quietly disrupts your hormones. If I could change just one habit in the lives of most of my patients, it would probably be this one. Not because sleep is a miracle cure, but because it influences almost every system we've talked about so far. Your brain, your hormones, your metabolism, your mood, your immune system, even your cardiovascular health. Yet somehow, sleep is often treated like it's optional. People proudly say, I only sleep 5 hours. I'll catch up on the weekend. I've always been a night owl. But your body doesn't really care how busy your schedule is. It still needs time to repair itself. Think about what happens while you're asleep. Your brain organizes memories. Your hormones are carefully released in natural cycles. Your muscles recover, damaged cells begin repairing themselves. Inflammation decreases. Your nervous system resets. It's almost like your body enters its own overnight maintenance program. Now imagine interrupting that process. Night after night, month after month. Eventually, those systems begin struggling to keep up. One of the first things many people notice is fatigue. Then mood changes. Concentration becomes harder. Patience gets shorter. Motivation starts disappearing. And somewhere along the way, so does libido. For men, quality sleep is especially important because a large portion of testosterone production happens during sleep, particularly during the deeper stages. That means sleeping 6 hours instead of 8 isn't simply losing 2 hours. Sometimes you're losing the very stages of sleep where your body performs some of its most important hormonal work. That's one reason men who are chronically sleep deprived often report lower energy, reduced motivation, poorer athletic recovery, and decreased sexual desire. Women experience something remarkably similar. Although the hormonal pathways are different, poor sleep affects estrogen regulation, cortisol, insulin sensitivity, mood, and emotional resilience. And because desire depends on all of those systems working together, poor sleep quietly begins pulling everything out of balance. Now, here's something many people overlook. It's possible to spend 8 hours in bed and still not get restorative sleep. Quality matters just as much as quantity. Do you wake several times during the night? Do you fall asleep with the television on? Do you spend 30 minutes scrolling through social media before closing your eyes? Do you drink coffee late in the afternoon? Do you rely on alcohol to help you fall asleep? All of those habits can reduce sleep quality, even if you technically stayed in bed long enough. Let's talk about caffeine for a moment. Many people are surprised to learn that caffeine can stay in the body much longer than they expect. Depending on the individual, it may remain active for 5 to 6 hours, sometimes even longer. So that afternoon coffee at 4 o'clock may still be affecting your brain close to bedtime. You might fall asleep, but your sleep may not be as deep or restorative as your body needs. Alcohol creates another common misunderstanding. People often say, but alcohol helps me sleep. It may help you fall asleep faster, but falling asleep isn't the same thing as sleeping well. Alcohol disrupts normal sleep architecture. It reduces the quality of deep sleep. Many people wake during the night without fully realizing it. The next morning, they assume they slept enough. Their body disagrees. Now let's talk about a condition that affects millions of people, many of whom don't even know they have it. Sleep apnea. As a urologist, I frequently work alongside other specialists because sexual health doesn't exist in isolation. And sleep apnea is one condition that deserves far more attention. If your partner tells you that you snore loudly, if they notice you stop breathing during sleep, if you wake up gasping for air, if you're exhausted every afternoon despite spending plenty of time in bed, those are signs worth discussing with your doctor. Here's why. During sleep apnea, breathing repeatedly stops for brief periods. Each time that happens, oxygen levels fall. Your brain senses danger. It briefly wakes you just enough to start breathing again. Most people never remember these awakenings, but they can happen dozens and sometimes even hundreds of times in a single night. Imagine trying to recharge your phone while someone keeps unplugging it every few minutes. Eventually, it never reaches a full charge. Your body works the same way. Without uninterrupted restorative sleep, hormones become disrupted. Energy declines, mood changes, blood pressure often rises, heart disease risk increases, and sexual function commonly suffers. Some patients spend years searching for hormone treatments, only to discover that treating their sleep apnea dramatically improves how they feel. That's why looking at the whole person matters, not just one symptom. Now here's another fascinating connection. When people consistently sleep well, something else tends to improve almost automatically: their ability to handle stress. Remember cortisol? Good sleep helps regulate it. When your body is well rested, stressful situations often feel more manageable. Your brain becomes more resilient. Your emotional reactions become more balanced. In other words, better sleep doesn't remove life's challenges. It simply helps your body respond to them more effectively. Now, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you truly woke up feeling refreshed? Not just awake, refreshed. If it's been months or even years, that may be one of the most important clues your body has been giving you. Because sometimes what people describe as low libido is actually profound exhaustion. Your body isn't refusing intimacy, it's asking for recovery. And once that recovery begins, many people are amazed by how much of themselves starts returning. Their energy improves, their mood improves, their patience improves, their relationships improve, and quite often, their desire begins returning too. But what if you're sleeping well, managing your stress, doing everything right, and your libido is still disappearing? Well, the next reason catches countless people by surprise. Because sometimes the problem isn't your lifestyle at all. Sometimes it's sitting quietly inside your medicine cabinet. Which brings us to number 7, the medications that may be quietly affecting your libido. Imagine this. You're taking medication exactly as your doctor prescribed. Your blood pressure is improving, your anxiety feels more manageable, your depression is finally lifting, or your chronic pain is under better control. Everything seems to be moving in the right direction, until one day, you notice something has changed. You don't think about intimacy the way you used to. The excitement feels different. The desire isn't there. You start asking yourself, is this just part of getting older? Or worse, have I fallen out of love? But sometimes, neither of those explanations is true. Sometimes the answer is much simpler. Certain medications can influence the very brain chemicals and hormones that regulate sexual desire. Now, let me be very clear about something. This is incredibly important. I'm not saying these medications are bad. Many of them are life-changing. Some are life-saving. And if you're taking prescription medication, never stop it on your own without speaking to the healthcare professional who prescribed it. My goal isn't to make you fearful. It's to help you ask the right questions if you've noticed a significant change. Let's start with one of the most common examples: certain antidepressants, particularly a group known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. These medications help millions of people by improving symptoms of depression and anxiety. They do that by increasing serotonin activity in the brain. Remember what we talked about earlier? Your brain has an accelerator, and it has brakes. Serotonin is one of the chemicals involved in those braking systems. For many people, increasing serotonin is incredibly beneficial for emotional health. But in some individuals, it can also reduce sexual desire, make arousal more difficult, delay orgasm, or decrease overall sexual satisfaction. That doesn't happen to everyone. But it happens often enough that it's something doctors routinely discuss with patients. The encouraging news is that if this happens, you have options. Sometimes adjusting the dose is enough. Sometimes changing the medication works. Sometimes another medication can be added under medical supervision to reduce those side effects. That's why communication with your healthcare provider is so important. Now let's look at another category, certain anti-anxiety medications. Some of these medications help calm an overactive nervous system. They can be extremely helpful for panic attacks, severe anxiety, or short-term treatment. But because they slow activity within the central nervous system, some people notice reduced motivation, lower energy, and decreased sexual interest. Then there are opioid pain medications. These medications play an important role for certain people living with severe pain. However, long-term opioid use may interfere with hormone production. Over time, testosterone levels may decrease in both men and women. Lower hormone levels often mean lower libido. Again, this doesn't mean anyone should suddenly stop taking pain medication. It simply means it's worth discussing symptoms openly with your healthcare provider. Now let's talk about a medication many men have heard about, finasteride. It's commonly prescribed for hair loss and enlarged prostate conditions. For many people, it works very well. But a small percentage of men report changes in sexual desire or sexual function while taking it. Researchers continue studying why this happens. The important thing is recognizing that if symptoms begin after starting a medication, the timing may not be a coincidence. Women may experience something similar with certain hormonal contraceptives. Birth control pills are safe and effective for millions of women. But hormones influence every body differently. Some women notice no change at all. Others experience improvements in quality of life. And some notice changes in libido. One possible reason is that certain hormonal contraceptives can influence the amount of free testosterone circulating in the body. Remember, women naturally produce testosterone too, although it's present in much smaller amounts than in men. It still contributes to healthy sexual desire. For some women, those hormonal changes become noticeable. Again, the answer isn't to stop your medication without guidance. The answer is to have an informed conversation, because there are often alternatives available. One thing I always encourage my patients to do is pay attention to timing. Ask yourself, when did I first notice this change? Did it begin after starting a medication? After increasing a dose? After another medical condition developed? Those details help your healthcare provider connect the dots much more quickly. Now, here's another mistake people make. They assume every change in libido must be medication-related. Not necessarily. Sometimes medications contribute, but they're only one piece of a much larger picture. Remember, sleep, stress, hormones, nutrition, exercise, medical conditions, relationships. Everything we've discussed so far works together. That's why we never want to focus on just one factor while ignoring all the others. Now let's move to something that often has an even greater influence than medication. And surprisingly, it has nothing to do with hormones. It has everything to do with human connection. Because even perfectly healthy people with excellent hormone levels, normal blood work, and no significant medical problems can still experience low libido. Why? Because intimacy doesn't happen in isolation. It happens inside relationships, which brings us to number 6. Emotional distance and relationship stress can quietly turn off desire. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you and your partner spent time together with no phones, no television, no distractions, and no agenda? Not talking about bills, not discussing work, not planning the kids' schedules, just being together. For many couples, it's been a long time, and that's completely understandable. Life gets busy, responsibilities multiply. Before you know it, your relationship becomes a series of tasks instead of moments. You coordinate schedules, pay bills, run errands, take care of children, go to work, come home exhausted, repeat. Somewhere along the way, emotional connection quietly begins taking a back seat. And because emotional connection is so closely tied to physical intimacy, libido often follows. One thing I want every couple to understand is this: low desire does not automatically mean you're falling out of love. In fact, many people with low libido deeply love their partner. They simply don't have the emotional or physical energy to experience desire the way they once did. That's a very different problem. Think of your relationship like a garden. You can't water it once, then expect flowers to bloom forever. It needs consistent care, small moments, shared laughter, kind words, physical affection without pressure, time together. Those seemingly ordinary moments create emotional safety, and emotional safety allows intimacy to grow. Now, here's one of the biggest misunderstandings about sexual desire. Many people believe desire always comes first. They think, I should feel turned on before I want to cuddle, kiss, or spend intimate time together. But that's not how the brain works for everyone. In fact, for many people, especially those in long-term relationships, desire often comes after connection begins. This is called responsive desire, and understanding it can completely change the way you think about intimacy. Imagine this. You and your partner decide to spend an evening together. No expectations, no pressure. You watch a movie, hold hands, laugh, talk about your day. You hug, you kiss. Slowly, almost without realizing it, your body begins responding. Your brain starts releasing dopamine. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, increases. You begin feeling emotionally connected. Then, desire appears. Notice what happened. Desire didn't arrive first, connection did. This surprises so many people because movies often show the opposite. Someone walks into the room, the music starts, instant passion. Real life is usually much quieter than that, and that's perfectly normal. One of the biggest mistakes couples make is waiting to feel in the mood. If both partners are waiting, nothing happens. Weeks pass, then months, sometimes years. Not because either person stopped caring, but because both were waiting for spontaneous desire, when their brains had gradually shifted toward responsive desire instead. Understanding that one concept has saved countless relationships from unnecessary worry. Now, there's something else we have to talk about: communication. Most of us were never taught how to talk about sex. We learned math, science, history, languages, but very few of us learned how to have open, respectful conversations about intimacy. So when something changes, silence often takes over. One partner starts worrying, they don't find me attractive anymore. The other partner is thinking, I'm exhausted, embarrassed, and I don't know how to explain what's happening. Both people are hurting. Neither one is talking. That's how misunderstanding grows. Healthy communication doesn't require perfect words. It simply requires honesty. Sometimes saying, I've noticed some changes in my body. I miss feeling close to you. I'd like us to figure this out together. Those simple conversations can completely change the direction of a relationship. Not because they solve everything overnight, but because they replace assumptions with understanding. And here's another suggestion that often surprises people: schedule intimacy. Now, before you say, that doesn't sound romantic, hear me out. I'm not talking about scheduling sex. I'm talking about scheduling connection. Think about it. You schedule meetings, doctor's appointments, exercise, family events, vacations. Everything important goes on the calendar. Yet somehow we expect intimacy to happen magically in lives that are already overflowing with responsibilities. Instead, schedule uninterrupted time together. Maybe it's Friday evening, maybe it's Sunday morning, maybe it's 30 minutes after dinner, no phones, no work, no pressure, no expectation that sex has to happen. Just time to reconnect. Ironically, when you remove the pressure to perform, desire often begins returning naturally because pressure activates stress. And stress, as we've learned, works directly against libido. Now, before we move to the next reason, I want to pause for just a second. If you're learning something today and you'd like to help more people discover reliable, evidence-based health information, take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone you care about. The right information really can change someone's life. And while you're here, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever noticed stress, poor sleep, or another health condition affecting your libido? Or maybe you found something that helped you reconnect with your partner. Share your experience in the comments. You never know who might read your story and realize they're not alone. Now, let's continue, because the next reason is one of the biggest hidden causes of low libido, and many people have absolutely no idea it's affecting them. You can eat well, exercise regularly, have a healthy relationship, sleep 8 hours a night, and still experience low desire because your body may be quietly dealing with a medical condition that hasn't been diagnosed yet. Which brings us to number 5. Hidden medical conditions that quietly steal your libido. Here's something I tell my patients all the time. Never assume your body is working against you. More often than not, it's trying to get your attention. Low libido isn't a disease by itself, it's a symptom. It's your body's way of saying, something needs a closer look. That's why I never like jumping straight to treatments before understanding the cause. Because if you only treat the symptom, you'll often miss the real problem. Let's begin with one of the most common conditions affecting millions of people worldwide: diabetes. Most people know diabetes affects blood sugar. Many know it can damage the eyes, kidneys, nerves, and heart. Far fewer realize how closely it's connected to sexual health. Over time, elevated blood sugar can damage the tiny blood vessels and nerves that carry sensation throughout the body. Those delicate nerves are responsible for helping your brain recognize pleasurable touch. As they become damaged, sensation may gradually decrease. For men, this may contribute to weaker erections, delayed arousal, or difficulty maintaining sexual function. For women, blood flow to the genital tissues may decrease, natural lubrication may change, and intimacy may simply not feel the way it once did. And here's what often happens next. If intimacy becomes less enjoyable, your brain begins associating it with disappointment instead of pleasure. Eventually, desire begins fading too. Notice something important. The problem didn't begin with attraction. It began with circulation and nerve health. That's why taking care of your blood sugar isn't only about preventing future complications. It's about protecting the quality of your everyday life. Now let's move to another organ that many people rarely think about, your thyroid. It's a small butterfly-shaped gland in the front of your neck, yet it influences almost every cell in your body. It helps regulate metabolism, energy production, body temperature, mood, heart rate, hormone balance. When your thyroid becomes underactive, everything slows down. People often describe feeling constantly tired, mentally foggy, emotionally flat. They gain weight more easily, their skin becomes dry, their motivation fades, and very often, their libido declines too, not because they've lost interest in their partner, but because their entire body is operating in slow motion. An overactive thyroid can also create problems. Instead of fatigue, you may experience anxiety, restlessness, poor sleep, heart palpitations, weight loss, constant nervous energy. Again, none of those conditions create an environment where healthy desire naturally thrives. This is one reason simple blood tests can sometimes reveal answers people have been searching for over many months. Another hormone worth mentioning is prolactin. Most people have never heard of it. Normally, prolactin plays an important role during pregnancy and breastfeeding. But when prolactin levels become abnormally elevated outside of those situations, they can interfere with reproductive hormones in both men and women. The result may include reduced libido, fertility changes, and other hormonal symptoms. Fortunately, many hormonal imbalances can be identified through proper evaluation, and when treated appropriately, symptoms often improve. Now here's another condition we don't talk about nearly enough. Chronic pain. Imagine touching a hot stove. Your brain immediately remembers the pain. The next time you reach toward that stove, your body becomes cautious. The same protective mechanism happens during intimacy. If sex repeatedly becomes painful, your brain starts anticipating discomfort before intimacy even begins. That's not weakness. It's your nervous system trying to protect you. For women, pain may develop because of menopause, vaginal dryness, pelvic floor muscle dysfunction, endometriosis, previous childbirth injuries, or several other treatable conditions. Many women silently accept discomfort because they believe it's simply part of getting older. It isn't. Pain during intimacy deserves medical attention. There are often excellent treatments available, sometimes pelvic floor physical therapy, sometimes localized hormone therapy, sometimes treating the underlying condition. The important thing is recognizing that pain is not something you simply have to tolerate. Men experience similar protective responses. If erections become unreliable, if ejaculation becomes painful, or previous experiences created embarrassment. Performance anxiety often develops. That anxiety activates stress hormones. Stress hormones interfere with sexual function. The next experience becomes even more difficult. Before long, a cycle begins. One disappointing experience creates anxiety. Anxiety reduces confidence. Reduced confidence lowers desire. Lower desire leads to avoidance. Avoidance creates emotional distance. Breaking that cycle begins with understanding it. Now let's talk about something that often surprises people even more. Body image. Many assume body image only affects teenagers or young adults. That simply isn't true. I've cared for patients in their 20s, their 40s, their 60s, even their 80s, who quietly admitted they no longer felt attractive. Some worried about weight gain, others about surgical scars, hair loss, changes after pregnancy, changes after cancer treatment, or simply the natural changes that come with aging. Here's what many people don't realize. The brain can't fully experience pleasure while constantly criticizing itself. If your mind is occupied with thoughts like, I hope my partner doesn't notice, I don't like the way I look, I'm embarrassed, then your attention shifts away from intimacy. You're physically present, but mentally somewhere else. And because your brain controls desire, those thoughts matter more than people realize. One of the most powerful changes I see in patients isn't always physical. Sometimes it's learning to stop speaking to themselves with constant criticism. Your body has carried you through your entire life. It has healed, adapted, protected you, recovered from illness, worked through sleepless nights, supported your family. It deserves compassion. And here's something beautiful I've witnessed over and over again. When people begin caring for themselves, instead of criticizing themselves, confidence slowly returns. And confidence often becomes one of the most attractive qualities any person can possess. Now, before we move to the next reason, let me reassure you of something. None of these conditions automatically mean your libido is gone forever. In fact, many of them are highly treatable. Sometimes improvement begins with controlling blood sugar, sometimes treating thyroid disease, sometimes addressing pelvic pain, sometimes improving circulation, sometimes simply identifying the problem brings enormous relief. Because uncertainty creates fear, understanding creates hope. And speaking of hope, the next reason is one that almost everyone has control over. In fact, the choices you make every single day, the way you sleep, move, eat, manage stress, and care for your body, may have a far greater impact on your libido than you ever imagined. Which brings us to Number 4, the daily habits that slowly turn desire off or bring it back again. Here's something I hope you'll remember long after this video ends. Your libido isn't determined by one decision. It's shaped by hundreds of small decisions you make every single day. That's actually wonderful news because it means small improvements, repeated consistently, can create remarkable changes over time. You don't have to completely change your life this week. You simply have to start giving your body what it's been asking for. Let's begin with one of the most powerful tools available, exercise. Now, before you picture spending 2 hours every day in the gym, that's not what I'm talking about. You don't have to become a marathon runner. You don't have to lift the heaviest weights. What your body needs most is consistency. Think about what happens every time you move. Your heart pumps faster, blood circulation improves, your blood vessels become healthier, oxygen reaches your muscles, your brain, and every organ more efficiently. Inflammation gradually decreases. Stress hormones begin falling. Mood-boosting chemicals like endorphins increase. And over time, your cardiovascular health improves. Now ask yourself this: what does healthy sexual function depend on? Healthy blood flow, healthy nerves, healthy hormones, healthy energy. Exercise supports every single one of those systems. For men, improved circulation helps maintain healthy erectile function because erections depend on strong blood flow. For women, increased circulation improves arousal, sensitivity, and natural lubrication. In other words, the same exercise that protects your heart is also protecting your sexual health. Now let's talk about resistance training. Building muscle isn't only about appearance. Muscle is one of the most metabolically active tissues in your body. Maintaining muscle supports healthy insulin sensitivity, improves metabolism, strengthens bones, and for many people, helps support healthy hormone balance. It also does something else that's incredibly important. It changes how you feel about yourself. I've had patients tell me, "Doctor, I haven't lost much weight yet, but I feel stronger. I have more energy. I feel confident again." Confidence changes the way you carry yourself. It changes your posture, your mood, your willingness to connect with your partner. Sometimes those psychological benefits arrive even before the physical changes become obvious. But here's an important balance. More exercise isn't always better. Extreme endurance training, especially without enough recovery, can actually increase cortisol levels for prolonged periods. Remember, your body interprets excessive physical stress the same way it interprets emotional stress. If recovery never happens, hormones begin shifting in the wrong direction. That's why balance is the goal. Challenge your body, then give it permission to recover. Recovery isn't weakness. Recovery is where healing happens. Now let's move to another habit that's becoming increasingly difficult in today's world: being fully present. Most people hear the word mindfulness and immediately think, I don't have time to meditate. But mindfulness is much simpler than that. It's the ability to give your full attention to the present moment, without judging yourself, without replaying yesterday, without worrying about tomorrow. Think about how often your brain is pulled in different directions: emails, phone notifications, social media, news, work, family, responsibilities. By the time evening arrives, your body may finally be sitting still, but your mind is still racing. Now imagine trying to experience intimacy while mentally reviewing tomorrow's schedule. It's almost impossible. Healthy intimacy requires presence. It requires allowing your brain to experience what's happening right now. Research has repeatedly shown that people who practice mindfulness often experience improvements in stress, body image, relationship satisfaction, and in many cases, sexual desire. Why? Because mindfulness helps quiet the constant mental noise that keeps your brain in survival mode. Instead of worrying, you begin noticing. Instead of judging, you begin experiencing. That simple shift can completely change intimacy. Now let's talk about nutrition. People often ask me, Doctor, is there one food that increases libido? The honest answer, not really. Despite what advertisements may promise, there isn't one magical fruit, herb, or expensive superfood that instantly transforms your sex drive. But there is something much more powerful: an overall healthy eating pattern. Every hormone your body produces, every cell it repairs, every neurotransmitter your brain creates, depends on nutrients from the foods you eat. A diet rich in colorful vegetables, fresh fruits, lean proteins, healthy fats, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and omega-3 rich fish supports healthy blood vessels, healthy hormone production, and healthy brain function. Notice something interesting. These are exactly the same foods doctors recommend for protecting your heart. That's not a coincidence. Healthy circulation benefits every organ in your body, including those involved in intimacy. Certain nutrients like zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D are also important. If you're deficient, correcting those deficiencies may support overall health, but supplements should never replace healthy habits. No supplement can consistently overcome chronic sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, constant stress, or lack of physical activity. Think of supplements as assistants, not superheroes. Now let's address two habits that quietly work against your libido: smoking and excessive alcohol. Smoking damages blood vessels throughout the body. Those tiny vessels carry oxygen and nutrients everywhere, including the reproductive organs. Over time, reduced circulation can affect erections, arousal, and sensation. Quitting smoking benefits far more than your lungs. It improves circulation from head to toe. Alcohol presents a different challenge. One drink may help someone feel more relaxed, but larger amounts begin slowing communication within the nervous system. Sleep quality decreases, hormone balance changes, reaction times slow. Over time, heavy alcohol use has been associated with reduced sexual function in both men and women. Moderation truly matters. Now, before we continue, if you're finding today's video helpful and you've learned something new, have you noticed that stress, poor sleep, or another health condition affected your libido? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Now, we've reached the final stretch. The next 3 reasons are the ones people ask me about most often. We'll talk about hormones, the biggest myths surrounding testosterone, and finally, the number 1 reason so many people believe they've lost their libido, when in reality, they've simply misunderstood how healthy desire actually works. Number 3, hormones matter, but they're not the whole story. By now, you've probably noticed a pattern. Every reason we've discussed has been connected. Your brain affects your hormones affect your sleep affects your stress affects your relationships. Nothing inside your body works in isolation. And yet, when people think about libido, there's one word that almost always comes up first: testosterone. As a urologist, this is probably one of the most common questions I hear. Doctor, should I have my testosterone checked? The answer is maybe. But before we talk about testing, let's clear up one of the biggest misconceptions. Testosterone is incredibly important, but it's not the only hormone responsible for healthy sexual desire. Think of your hormones like members of an orchestra. Testosterone is certainly one of the lead instruments, but if every other instrument is out of tune, even the best violinist can't create beautiful music alone. The same thing happens inside your body. Let's start with men. Healthy testosterone supports much more than libido. It helps maintain muscle mass, bone strength, energy, mood, mental clarity, red blood cell production, motivation, and healthy sexual function. When testosterone levels begin falling below what your body needs, many men notice subtle changes long before they think about their sex drive. They wake up tired. Recovery after exercise takes longer. Building muscle becomes difficult. Body fat slowly increases. Motivation fades. Even simple daily tasks feel more exhausting than they used to. Only later do they realize, my desire isn't what it used to be either. Another clue many men notice is fewer spontaneous morning erections. Now, this doesn't automatically mean testosterone is low, but it's one piece of information that helps doctors understand the bigger picture. Here's something else that's extremely important. Symptoms matter just as much as laboratory numbers. Two men can have exactly the same testosterone level. One feels energetic, the other feels completely exhausted. Why? Because hormone levels don't tell the entire story. Every person's body responds differently. Genetics matter, sleep matters, body weight matters, exercise matters, stress matters, other medical conditions matter. That's why good medicine treats the patient, not just the blood test. Now let's talk about women. This surprises almost everyone. Women naturally produce testosterone too. In fact, many people assume testosterone is only a male hormone. It isn't. Women simply produce much smaller amounts. Even so, testosterone contributes to healthy desire, energy, motivation, bone health, and muscle strength. During menopause, hormone levels naturally change. Estrogen decreases. Testosterone may gradually decline as well. Some women notice vaginal dryness. Others experience discomfort during intimacy. Some notice reduced desire. Others experience all three. Again, every woman is different. This is exactly why individualized care matters. Sometimes localized estrogen therapy can be incredibly effective. Sometimes pelvic floor physical therapy makes the biggest difference. Sometimes improving sleep and reducing stress produce noticeable improvements. And sometimes hormone therapy is appropriate after careful evaluation. The key word is individualized. There is no one-size-fits-all treatment. Now let's discuss another mistake I see all the time. People start taking hormone supplements because they saw an advertisement online. Please be careful. Hormones are powerful. Too little can create problems. Too much can also create problems. More isn't always better. Your goal isn't to achieve the highest possible hormone level. Your goal is to achieve the healthiest hormone balance for your own body. That's a very different objective. Another question patients frequently ask is, what about natural testosterone boosters? You've probably seen them advertised everywhere. Colorful bottles, bold promises, claims of restoring youth overnight. The reality is, most haven't demonstrated strong scientific evidence. Some contain ingredients that have shown modest benefits in small studies. Others have almost no reliable evidence at all. And because supplements aren't regulated the same way prescription medications are, the ingredient listed on the label isn't always present in the amount advertised. That's one reason I encourage patients to be cautious. If you're considering supplements, have that conversation with your healthcare provider first. Sometimes what appears to be low testosterone is actually poor sleep, chronic stress, vitamin deficiencies, weight gain, or another medical condition that's completely treatable. Now let's talk briefly about two supplements people ask me about most often, Masa and ashwagandha. Maca has shown some encouraging findings in small studies regarding sexual desire. Ashwagandha appears promising for some individuals because it may help reduce chronic stress. And as we've already discussed, reducing chronic stress often supports healthier libido. But here's the important point. Neither supplement replaces healthy sleep. Neither replaces exercise. Neither replaces communication. Neither replaces proper medical evaluation. They're supporting tools, not miracle cures. Now here's something that gives many patients hope. Hormonal health is surprisingly responsive to lifestyle. When people begin sleeping 7 to 8 hours consistently, reducing excess body weight, building muscle, managing blood sugar, reducing alcohol, treating sleep apnea, and lowering chronic stress, hormone levels often begin improving naturally. Not dramatically overnight, but steadily. That's one of the reasons I encourage patients to focus on building healthy habits before chasing shortcuts. Your body has an incredible ability to recover when it's given the right environment. Now, we finally arrived at the biggest misconception of all. The reason so many people believe they've permanently lost their libido, when in reality, they've simply misunderstood how healthy desire works. And once you understand this final reason, everything we've discussed today begins fitting together, which brings us to number 2. You've been waiting for desire instead of understanding how desire actually begins. If there's one lesson I hope you remember from today's video, it's this. Healthy desire doesn't always arrive the way Hollywood tells us it should. For years, we've been shown the same story. 2 people lock eyes, music starts playing. Instant passion, no planning, no conversation, no effort, just immediate chemistry. It's entertaining, but it isn't how real life works for many people, especially after years together, especially after children, especially after stressful careers, health challenges, or simply the responsibilities of adult life. One of the greatest breakthroughs in sexual medicine has been understanding that there are actually 2 different ways people experience desire. The first is called spontaneous desire. This is the kind most people recognize. You see your partner, you think about them, and almost instantly, you feel interested in intimacy. This often happens more frequently in newer relationships because novelty activates the brain's reward system. Everything feels exciting, everything feels unpredictable. Your brain releases dopamine more easily because it's experiencing something new. But over time, relationships naturally become more familiar. That's not a bad thing. It's actually a sign of emotional security. The problem is, many people mistake familiarity for lost attraction. They assume something is wrong because they don't experience spontaneous desire as often as they once did. In reality, their brain has simply shifted toward a different pattern. This brings us to the second type of desire, responsive desire. And understanding this one concept has completely changed the lives of many of my patients. Responsive desire doesn't begin with excitement. It begins with connection. You spend time together, you laugh, you hug, you cuddle, you hold hands, you kiss, you feel emotionally safe. Gradually, your brain begins releasing dopamine. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, increases. Blood flow changes. Your nervous system relaxes. Then, desire quietly appears. Notice what happened. Desire didn't come first. Connection did. That changes everything. Because if you're constantly waiting to feel in the mood before allowing yourself to connect, you may spend months waiting for something that only appears after connection has already begun. This misunderstanding causes unnecessary anxiety in countless relationships. One partner thinks, "I never feel desire anymore." The other partner quietly wonders, "They're not attracted to me." Meanwhile, neither person realizes they're simply experiencing responsive desire instead of spontaneous desire. That realization alone often removes years of guilt. Now let's talk about something practical. How do you encourage responsive desire? You stop putting pressure on yourself. Pressure is one of desire's greatest enemies. Instead of asking, "Are we going to have sex tonight?" ask, "How can we spend meaningful time together tonight?" Those are very different questions. One creates expectation, the other creates opportunity. Sometimes that means taking a walk together, cooking dinner together, watching a movie while holding hands, giving each other a long hug after work, sitting outside and talking without looking at your phones. These moments may seem simple, but biologically, they're incredibly powerful. They activate emotional safety, and emotional safety allows desire to grow. Another strategy I often recommend surprises many couples. Schedule intimacy. Notice I didn't say schedule sex. Schedule intimacy. There's a difference. Think about everything else that's important in your life. Doctor appointments, business meetings, birthdays, vacations, exercise. You schedule them because they matter. Yet we often expect intimacy to happen only when there's extra time. Unfortunately, extra time rarely appears on its own. Life keeps moving. Responsibilities continue growing. If you don't intentionally create space for connection, it slowly disappears. Scheduling intimacy simply means protecting time for one another. No distractions, no pressure, no expectations, just being together. Ironically, removing pressure often allows desire to return naturally. Now here's another habit I'd encourage every couple to develop. Talk about intimacy outside the bedroom, not during an argument, not immediately before sex. Choose a relaxed moment, maybe while taking a walk, driving together, sharing a meal. Approach the conversation with curiosity instead of criticism. Ask questions like, "What helps you feel close to me? What makes you feel appreciated? What would help us reconnect?" These conversations may feel awkward at first. That's okay. Almost every new skill feels uncomfortable in the beginning. Communication is no different. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. Now I want to say something directly to anyone watching who feels discouraged. If you've been struggling with low libido, please don't assume your best years are behind you. I've seen people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and well beyond rediscover satisfying intimacy after addressing the underlying causes. Not because they became younger, but because they became healthier. Health has a remarkable way of restoring hope. And that leads us to the final reason, the reason I intentionally saved until the very end. Because after everything we've discussed today, it isn't actually about hormones, or medications, or stress, or sleep, or even relationships alone. They all matter, but they all point toward one bigger truth. Number one, your libido isn't gone. Your body is asking you to heal. We finally reached the number one reason, and it's probably not what you expected. After everything we've talked about today, your brain, your hormones, stress, sleep, medications, relationships, medical conditions, lifestyle, they all have something in common. They're not your enemy. They're your body's way of communicating with you. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that libido simply disappears, as if one day it wakes up and decides to leave forever. That's rarely what actually happens. More often, your body slowly starts whispering. First, your energy changes, then your sleep, then your mood. Maybe you begin gaining weight more easily, or exercising becomes harder. Perhaps work becomes overwhelming. Your relationship receives less attention. Your confidence begins slipping. Your stress quietly increases, one by one. Those small changes begin stacking on top of each other. Eventually, your libido changes too. But your libido wasn't the beginning of the story. It was simply the final chapter your body hoped you would notice. That's why I encourage every patient to stop asking, "How do I get my sex drive back?" and instead ask, "What is my body trying to tell me?" Those two questions lead to completely different journeys. The first searches for a quick fix, the second searches for lasting health. Because when you improve your overall health, your libido often improves alongside it. When you sleep better, your hormones begin recovering. When you reduce chronic stress, your nervous system feels safe again. When you exercise regularly, blood flow improves, confidence grows, energy returns. When you nourish your body with healthier foods, and yes, your cells have the building blocks they need to produce hormones and support healthy brain function. When you communicate openly with your partner, emotional safety grows stronger. And when emotional safety grows, connection often follows. Little by little, your body begins remembering how it was designed to function. That's why healing rarely happens overnight. Think about how long it took for these changes to develop. Months, sometimes years. It makes sense that recovery also takes time. And that's okay. Your body is remarkably adaptable. I've watched patients walk into my office convinced they would never feel like themselves again. Some believed age had permanently taken away their desire. Others blamed themselves. Some thought their relationship was over. Then we slowed down. We asked better questions. We looked beyond the symptoms. Sometimes we discovered untreated diabetes, sometimes thyroid disease, sometimes low testosterone, sometimes medication side effects, sometimes chronic stress, sometimes severe sleep deprivation, sometimes pelvic floor dysfunction, sometimes depression, and very often, it wasn't just one thing. It was several small things quietly working together. The encouraging news, those same small things can also work together in the opposite direction. Better sleep, healthier eating, more movement, less stress, open communication. Medical treatment when appropriate. One healthy decision supports the next, then another, then another. Healing gains momentum. That's exactly how lasting change happens. Not through perfection, through consistency. Now, I want to speak directly to anyone watching who feels discouraged. Maybe you've been struggling for months. Maybe it's been years. Maybe you've convinced yourself, this is just how life is now. Please don't give up on yourself. Your body has an incredible ability to recover when it's given the opportunity. I've seen marriages become stronger, confidence return, energy improve, patients smile again because they finally understood what was happening inside their own bodies. That is one of the greatest privileges of being a urologist, helping people realize they aren't broken. They're simply being asked to pay attention to their health in a new way. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one simple challenge. This week, choose just one healthy change, not 10. One. Maybe it's going to bed 30 minutes earlier. Maybe it's taking a walk after dinner. Maybe it's scheduling an appointment you've been putting off. Maybe it's having an honest conversation with your partner. Maybe it's reducing alcohol. Maybe it's putting your phone away before bed. Whatever it is, start there. Because one healthy decision often leads to another, then another, until one day, you look back and realize just how far you've come. If today's video helped you better understand your body, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me which of the 10 reasons surprised you the most. And if you or someone you know has experienced changes in libido or struggled silently with sexual health, let us know that too. Your story may give someone else the courage to seek the help they've been avoiding. You never know when one conversation, one reliable piece of information, or one encouraging message could completely change someone's life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly hope you leave today with something more valuable than information. Take good care of yourself. I'm Dr. Ava, and I will see you in the next video.